Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you. I hope that you had a marvelous 4th of July weekend. What a wonderful, wonderful time it was for a lot of people. I'd like to dedicate the show to someone near and dear to me. Many of you who are active, certainly in the Black church, um, would know Dr. Ludella Evans Reed. She and Maddie Moss Clark, Dr. Maddie Moss Clark, were women who maybe if they'd been born in another time, they would have pastored churches. But the ministry that they have had will impact us through the ages. They had a particularly emotive style of directing. When you see these directors now, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, who are filled with the Holy Spirit, Dr. Ludella Evans Reed was she and Dr. Maddie Moss Clark really pioneered that style of music worship together. Together, you have to understand that uh, in the Black churches, people like Mahalia Jackson were looked down upon because they were so emotive. You know, we had churches that were very, I guess, the frozen chosen, some people would call it. So Sam Cooke and the Soul Stirrers and the Mighty Clouds of Joy and Five Blind Boys of Mississippi and on and on, they would have to perform in the basements, not in the main sanctuaries.
Oh,
Of
interesting.
course, now, yeah. Well, we have wanted the
Frozen toast.
hymns
I like
and
that.
the
Yeah.
frozen chosen. Well, we have had our class issues because we've been reaching up too. I get it. And while there's space for the hymns, and I certainly appreciate and love that because I know that is really my baseline. That's where my gift has led me. But I love it all. I love it all. And she made her transition just some days ago. And when it was announced, just over the holiday weekend, when it was announced that she had pancreatic cancer, like her brother, the iconic Reverend Dr. Clay Evans, she shouted in the church, "It's all right. I don't have any pain. I've given it to God. That's God's problem. I'm just praising God. I'm
What was her
praising God."
name again, Santita?
Dr. Ludella Evans
Mhm.
Reed. She was Reverend Clay Evans' sister. And she was a minister of music of our church. And our pastor was so revolutionary. In those days, 70 years ago, for a woman to be the minister of music, that was highly unusual. But he was a very progressive man. And she co-founded Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church. And I've known her all of my life. And I thank God for her life. I thank God for her lessons and for her prophetic gifts, her musical gifts. And more than that, she didn't believe in God. She knew God. And there
Mm.
is a difference. And I thank God for her example. And I'm striving to follow her as I try to move toward the kingdom every day. Everybody, I do have God on my mind. What did Natalie Cole sing? I've got love on my mind, but you didn't know my uncle co-wrote that song. He and her husband Marvin Yancey were the writers of Our Love, This Will Be, and all of those iconic hits from her R&B era. And I'm wondering where the souls of the authors of and supporters of this big beautiful bill are, because we're not going to see it, interestingly, until after the 2026 election cycle. So a lot of people are going to go on merrily, 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 merrily. Life will be but a dream. And the real cuts aren't going to come, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, brilliant economist, until just after the 2026 election. Think about that, everybody. That is so slick and it is so cruel.
These people
What
are
if
both diabolical and Machiavellian.
they are? And I'm talking with you and Dr. Maxwell, two brilliant economists who also you made economics come alive. Both of you teach, you love people, you're concerned with people, and you have a bottom-up view and a global and holistic view of how we're impacted by the economy. You really made it your ministry and your mission to teach us, hey, wait a minute, this is not too hard for you. You need to understand this. And so I reached out to you because we're going to be taking apart this big, beautiful bill. In the next hour, we're going to talk with uh, Texas officials about what's happening in Texas. More than 100 people have been found dead as of now. And many people are saying it was the Doge cuts. We're going to talk about that in the next hour, but you are free, feel free, Dr. Malvo, President Emeritus of Bennett College for Women. Feel free to weigh in on that because these firings, many people down in Texas said we did not get adequate warning. Certainly, no one knew that this river would rise by tens of feet.
But it had risen in the past. It had not risen to this effect, but it
But
had risen
not
in the past. They
it.
should have. There's a person called some kind of
Mhm.
coordinator. That position was empty. That position was
That's
vacant.
right. Because
So
it's an area of the country that has I mean, Mississippi River runs through this part of the country. It starts up there with you, everybody, at AM 950 radio, and it runs straight clean down to the bottom of the country. And we understand flooding, but it
well, we
hadn't
understand,
flooded like that.
but
And so I want to find out this from you. Because I mean, you can weigh in on that, but the reason I came to you because I saw something that was so disturbing. I said, "Oh, Dr. Malvo, you got to help me with this one. You got to help me with this one." And you were even shocked. Now, it's hard to shock you. Hard. But I think it's important that we look at this. I think that we need to understand that the Agriculture Secretary of the United States believes that the deportations of our farm workers, that's okay. Now, mind you, they didn't come here just of their own volition. Our corporations have been bringing them in.
and
And we
recruiting
have
them,
been, that's
spending
right.
money to recruit them to come, just like those workers in that the president and the vice president started to lie on that they were eating people's pets. They were recruited to come. I mean,
It's policy.
they're
Our own
recruited
Secretary of
because
State
guess what?
signed
Black
papers on this.
folks and brown folks are not lining up. Citizens are not lining up to pick crops.
Well, and
But
to be
I
and to be disrespected, it's necessary work, but we don't treat
no,
these
we
people
disrespect these
as
people.
and so you're not going to line up for that work. You're
No,
not.
and we
It,
haven't that we haven't seen it. So that's why we have to basically recruit workers from other countries, mostly from Mexico, but not exclusively.
we were the first recruits. Okay, they brought us in, black folks.
Oh yeah,
Okay, so
they were
this
people
is
of the United States of America were
that's right.
not for the work of enslaved Africans.
It continued. This country was not built by immigrants. Immigrants came here to get jobs, and then they built upon what the foundation and not just the contours. The country was built by enslaved people, and we have continued to import neo-slave labor. The 10th
Exactly,
Pro
and treat
Partnership for
them.
Refugees, and treat them like that. I keep saying Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, the then Secretary of State, and the creator of Kobani yogurt gave us a 10th Partnership for Refugees. It outlines us, everybody. But what do you think of able-bodied workers, as she put it? 34 million of them, she said, could be put to work in the fields. She said, let the farm workers go home. They should, with these work requirements. So you tell me, because I mean, I just want people to know that this is what she said, even though the Economic Policy Institute, people with whom you've worked, with whom you're familiar, said these work requirements don't work. But Common Dreams said this. U.S. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins on Tuesday, today, you'll be discussing this tomorrow, drew instant jeers when she defended the mass deportation of immigrant farm laborers and suggested that they could be replaced by Americans who are currently enrolled in Medicaid. While speaking in Washington, D.C., Rollins declared that, quote, there would be no amnesty, close quote, for immigrant farm workers, despite President Donald Trump saying just days ago that he was willing to let these workers stay at their jobs.
Well,
She
first of
believes
all,
that they should continue these deportations in a strategic way. I don't know if that means just the blue states, but At the end of the day, she feels that they can be replaced by Medicaid recipients. Go for it, Dr. Melville.
Well, first of all, this is the stupidest, what I've ever heard. Many Medicaid recipients live in urban areas. Most of this agricultural work happens in rural areas. What are we going to do? We're going to move people from downtown LA out to the fields? I don't.
But let me ask you this: would you put that past them? Because they're already arresting people and shuffling them everywhere.
I don't know if you heard what happened today in LA.
What happened in LA? Because I hear that LA quietly is being shut down because the workers are being disappeared.
Well, I believe it was ICE and the National Guard went to MacArthur Park, which is a very popular
Mhm.
park in LA. They went there. They didn't arrest anybody. They just walked around with their riot gear on.
Mhm.
Basically intimidation. Basically doing intimidation. And I think
And
one of
were they were in their full military gear?
yes,
Right?
yes.
And
And
many of them are they have their faces obscured, don't they?
precisely. So
Okay.
nobody knows who they are. But you have these fools basically downtown LA, MacArthur Park, where a place where people go to relax, to hang out.
That's from the song, right?
Yeah. And
Okay.
sometimes people walk through there to get their bus or something like that. I don't even understand what possessed them to do such a thing. But what we know, Mayor Karen Bass rushed down there and asked them to leave. Of course, they didn't. They don't respect her. She's a Black woman mayor who does great work. But they have been, LA has been targeted, first of all, because it has a heavy Latino population. And some of those folks, but not all of them, some of them are, of course, undocumented. So that's number one. But secondly, it's a democratic city in a democratic state. And the man who lives in the house that enslaved people built, repeat, the house that enslaved people built.
The house that
Essentially,
enslaved people built, the White House.
I don't call it that. I call it the house that enslaved people.
But I want people to know that enslaved
That's what
people
I
built
mean.
the
Yes,
White House. Yeah.
exactly. And he, in his historical denial, he doesn't realize that that's where he lives. Um, but in any case, neither here nor there. You got LA has been targeted. San Francisco less so. We now have a mayor in San Francisco who's very centrist, but we have Gavin Newsom, and Gavin Newsom, the governor, he has been on the president's case since the man was elected. Even before that, he was a designated surrogate for President Biden. He actually was he played Biden in some of the debate prep. He's very good.
Mhm.
My little personal footnote is we both ran for office at the same time back in 1984.
Mm.
I ran for the board of supervisors, got my butt beat. There were about 30 of us running for 5 seats. I think I came in about 8th or 9th, so I wasn't even within spitting distance. Um, but it was fun, and that's how one of the I met Reverend Jackson a bazillion years ago, but I was a Jackson delegate in '84
Mhm.
or alternate. I forget which one, and a surrogate. So I told the story at the um, meeting last Saturday, not the Saturday before, where some people had asked him to come speak, and he said, "Malvo, I need you to go do this for me." So I had to fly someplace, and the people looked so hurt when I got off the plane, and they had a sign that said Reverend Jesse Jackson. And I said, "Hi, I'm Julianne Malvo, and I think they called you to say that I was coming." And the lady said, "But we told them that was unacceptable." I said, "I'm here, and Reverend cannot be in 3 places at one time. So this is the best you got." I
Malvo.
think that kind of halfway started me on my speaking career because I actually did do a good job.
I'm
Uh,
sure you did.
but it was, but if you saw these people's faces, Santita, their faces fell. Like, who is this little chickie coming here? We were looking for Reverend Jackson. sees what
you know we all know that is. Look, everybody's sloppy seconds. I get it.
all of us. You're absolutely
So
but
I don't even worry about that.
but back to
But
Reverend.
let me ask you this. I mean, just given your understanding of this economic engine called the United States of America and the labor upon the unpaid labor upon which it has been built, the poorly paid labor, the child labor upon which it has
God, yes.
continuously been built. I mean, they just keep on going. You know, Reverend Jackson said slave masters never retire, and they do not. What
No,
do
they
you make this woman in an open forum, the agriculture secretary? And wait a minute, everybody. The Department of Agriculture has agency over every township with a population of 500,000 or under. That's most of America.
yeah.
Most of America must go through the Department of Education. I did not know that until I heard Reverend say that in a speech. And he kept saying it until people heard him. He said, you have, because he brought the agriculture secretary to push more than once. And people were like, oh, he said, no, I'm bringing them here because you need to know how much power they have.
Exactly.
It's a vast, vast department. What just on an economic and on a philosophical level, when you first hear when I first shared that story with you, what was your reaction? Just give me your human reaction to that.
The clean version.
Well, you know, you can kind of reconstruct.
It was like, oh, hell to MF no. That's what I was like. Oh, hell,
What did that remind you of?
enslavement. Nothing but enslavement. And it also that was first. Secondly, I'm thinking through the practicality of this. See, these people keep saying they want to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. Well, that to me is an example of fraud, waste, and abuse. How do you actually actualize this? You tell people who receive Medicaid, we're going to send you to Central California, Fresno, outside Fresno, where you can pick crops at the minimum wage. How are you going to move them? What's their transportation going to be like? I mean, even the poorest urban person would not be willing to go to Central California to pick crops. That it just makes no sense at all.
But what if they're, but look at how they're handling arrests now, right?
Oh yeah, no.
What?
And frankly, Santita, years ago, I wasn't arrested, but I was detained because I resembled a Puerto Rican drug dealer.
Mm-hmm.
And a sister friend had canceled a speech during my life, and she said, "Can you fly in, and just do this?" She said, "You'll be back in San Francisco in 12 hours, 24 hours. You come, you do the speech." So I went, but I got detained at the airport and when I saw the picture of the woman, I did resemble her because I'm, we in the pale part of the Black family, and so and she had short red hair, which I do, although hers was pressed. Anyway, neither here nor there. They kept me until I called the NAACP that I was speaking with, and the brother knew the person at the airport, and he faxed them or whatever he did, a picture of me with the description of what I was going to do, and they apologized. They held me for an hour, so whatever. But they apologized, and there wasn't a lot I could do about it. They did have to give me some money, but it wasn't much. But anyway, the bottom line is anybody can be picked up. Anybody.
And taken anywhere. Because that's what they're doing.
Well,
I mean, we have Homan Square in Chicago, which is where they were. It was modeled on the CIA black sites, and many Black and brown people, men in particular, and disproportionate numbers of Black men, but they were Black and brown people. They were taken into this detaining facility, never to be seen again.
Well, this is where we are. The level of meanness, the idiocy, the abject idiocy. I do not understand how this woman, even if she thought it, how did that mess come out of her mouth? This is a quality of people that this man who lives in a house that enslaved people built, the quality of people that he's brought into his administration. people who don't know their hind parts from a hole in the wall, as my grandmother would say. People who this Santita, words cannot describe the outrage that many of us feel, not only at this administration, but at the manifestations of it, like that this woman would say this nonsense, and feel comfortable with it. And she also contradicted her boss, who had said, because, the president did not get as large as he is by refraining from meals. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Although there's not much lettuce in a McDonald's burger, but that's neither here nor there.
You are terrible.
Well, just saying.
He loves his food. I mean, and there you go.
So that's why he did the exception for the farm workers.
But they also Big Farm came in on him and said, hey, the whole industry will collapse if you deport all of these people. So he pulled back. I mean, it's another carve out, right? Because he's been doing carve outs.
I mean, we're now the tariffs that was supposed to take effect, I guess, on Independence Day, the 4th of July, America. But those are now pushed back into August. Do
you think they might get pushed back further?
More than likely.
Okay.
I mean, they say he sent out 100 letters to all these countries for them to renegotiate or offer something with tariffs. But again, he knew what he was doing when he said he was going to make the farm worker exemption and the hospitality industry. And the hospitality industry drives almost a seventh of our economy. So, if you're staying at whatever hotel you're staying at, you want your bed made, you want your goodies, and you're not going to get them if the housekeepers are not there because they've all been deported. So basically, she contradicted her boss, but there were no repercussions because he, first of all, he surrounded himself with a bunch of chuckleheads, and they don't know, like I said, their hind parts from a hole in the wall. But the unfortunate thing is the uncertainty, and that's what everyone is talking about in the policy space, the uncertainty that man has incited with people. I mean, people don't know what's going on. They don't know what the tariffs are going to be. Small businesses are complaining about how can we order going ahead. We don't know what the tariffs will be. If you've ordered something and essentially the tariff goes up, your price goes up. But you have a business and you planned essentially to pay X, not X times plus 120%. You plan to pay X. So that disrupts a business. Our sorority is meeting in Washington, D.C. as we speak. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I keep telling sorors about is, half of the swag we give away comes from China. The swag bag with the goodies in it and little things you have on your wrist and all that. That stuff comes from China. Mm-hmm. Well, this year it costs X, but what are we going to do in 2 years when we have the next sorority convention?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, how many people are going to be able to go? I mean, you see what happened with Essence Fest down in New Orleans. And I mean, we're seeing it happen everywhere. And quite frankly, wherever you've seen DEI connected businesses that had the DEI expenditures, a lot of these Black and brown and LGBTQ plus, well, just really America, these festivals and such are not getting their sponsorships. But what did you? So what are we to make of this? I mean, I've got Dr. Max Wolf who's in the waiting room. But I just want to repeat to everyone that the Agriculture Secretary called for us to step back and let mass deportations happen, as she put it, in a strategic way, and then put the able-bodied Medicaid recipients, most of whom, the overwhelming numbers of whom work.
Exactly.
They should be farm workers. I mean, what about that, Dr. Malvo?
Well, and the other important thing about the Agriculture Secretary is food stamps.
Okay.
Food stamps comes under the Department of Agriculture. Most of the people who get food stamps are working. They are not sitting on their behinds. They're working, but they seem to forget that. I suspect that food stamps will be the next thing that is cut.
Mhm.
And that it'll be the next thing that someone tries to put together with, they already have increased work requirement for food stamps, but I imagine they'll do some other things. And this is right along the lines. You're going to force undocumented people to work in agriculture, or force documented people who are U.S. citizens but are needy, receive Medicaid, receive food stamps. You're going to force them, according to her, strategically onto farms to do farm work that formerly undocumented people were doing. I don't get it, I suppose that man who lives in a house that enslaved people built, I suppose that he has his hands full with mayhem. But this was the kind of thing that really should have had, there should have been a reprimand. There should have been something. The president, we're distancing ourselves from that. There should have been something. Vance could have said something, the vice president, but no. I just think they like chaos and confusion. They love chaos and confusion. But that chaos and confusion hurts us. And we know that. And we really, these are the other things, Santita. We talk about Texas, and a lot of people have written and talked about the neighborliness of all the people coming rushing. But these people who they want to deport are our neighbors too.
Mhm.
They're citizens, or they're human beings too. Why has this not sparked more outrage? I'm glad that you found the piece. It really rattled my cage. But the fact is that these kind of things are happening over and over and over again. And we're only, half a year in. This man has 3.5 more years to create chaos and confusion, unless, as your dad always said, the same hands that pick peaches can pick presidents.
And he said the hands that picked cotton can pick presidents, because we picked cotton. We chopped that cotton and toted that bale. And we can make a change. What do you want to say before you go? Because I need to have you back on in the next day or so, because I've gotten several calls to ask about, just as a former college president. I was talking with someone this morning. She said, my daughter is 2 years from finishing, or a year from finishing law school.
A lot has happened. I mean, I interviewed 2 sisters from Dallas who are officers in AFG, the American Federation of Government Employees. They both were at the Department of Education. 1,400 people today, Santita, as we speak, are being paid to do nothing. Meanwhile, the financial aid offices are backed up. The what's that FAFSA form? Usually, those sisters will be among those who would be advising students how to fill out their forms. Well, 1,400 people down in just one office. What does that mean? And people are leaving the Department of Education because they've been basically cajoled with buyouts. Many of these are older people over 60, who have institutional knowledge. So what it means to, first of all, sister girl, please tell her, get her paperwork in order. And it should have been in, but unfortunately, some of us don't like to fill out paperwork. But we need to get that paperwork in order, because the college cannot give you financial aid until you filled out the FAFSA. Once you filled out the FAFSA, it determines how much you qualify for. And you may not get all of that, but you will probably get some of it. And especially the whole issue with Pell. Now, let me tell you what they've done with Pell. Pell used to define full-time enrollment as 12 units, that's 4 classes. For most students, a full load is 5 classes. But often first-year students, especially those who may have shaky academic backgrounds, are counseled to take 4 classes per semester for their first year. Because I'd rather you get 4 classes with an A or a B than 5 classes with a C or a D. So they've changed, but now they've changed that. So you will only get partial Pell if you only have 12 units.
I want you to come back and talk about that, because that is complex. People are in the middle of their graduate programs. They're in the middle of the undergraduate work. and they are worried about how they're going to finish. I have a friend who's
Well,
saying she's considering going into bankruptcy so she can finance the rest of her children's education.
tell her, don't do it just yet.
Okay.
Meanwhile, not just yet. Make sure your paperwork is in order. Be prepared to call the financial aid office at the school where your child is attending to try to negotiate something. It can, because often they can, as long if the FAFSA is in, that's okay. The biggest challenge that we have is a lot of people don't fill out forms. I don't know if I told you, I
Okay.
told somebody about the time this brother came to my office with like 12 grand in cash because he was, I believe, I don't know what he was. But I believe he was a drug dealer. But anyway, wherever he
Well,
was,
maybe, maybe not. Because a lot of people, a lot of us, a lot of people in our community, in the Black community, are not. They're unbanked.
well, that is, well, but
So
that
you know,
represents Santita, less than 10% of us. And
yeah.
the
But I'm saying, you know
that.
what? I'm watching people with. I mean, a lot of folks. We have to be very, very careful before we go because I'm going to bring up Dr. Wolf. Um, and I'm bringing him up right now. I mean, we got to be very,
You're
very
not a
careful.
drug dealer.
Oh well, now that's a good thing. Thank you.
Hey,
But
Dr. Wolf,
but
how
that
you doing?
Hello, how are you, doctor?
I'm good.
and
Good to see you.
and
Likewise.
of course he just put Max there. So okay, I'm with it.
The
But
highlights. It's all
maybe
downhill from there.
You know what? I'm sure you got a lot of good things to talk about with Dr. Wolf. So I'm going to say goodbye. We're going to talk. I will come back and talk about student financial aid
I
and this nonsense.
I really want you to do that because people are now these cuts are getting real to folks and they're frightened.
And they should be. If 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 your child, if your young person is, as you said, the lady said her child is finished 2 years.
Yeah,
The question is going to be what happens with the next 2 years given these cuts.
yeah,
And also, depending on her academic standing, any number of other things, taking 12 units disqualifies you from a full Pell. And they cut the size of the Pell. So the Pell used to be like 7,300, and they cut it down to 5,400. So it's about a 25% cut in the Pell. Now, the cost of attendance at Bennett College, which I know best, the cost of attendance is about $28,000. So $5,400 basically is a drop in the bucket. Howard University, your alma mater, costs $38,000. Again, $5,000 is a drop in the bucket. Where does all the rest of the money come? It comes from loans, and now they're changing loan programs for graduate students. So you're going to law school or medical school. They've changed the loan programs. Essentially, but you got to read Project 2025. This is what they said they were going to do. So fools who didn't believe that Pat meat was greasy basically said he's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. Well, he did it. He did it.
It's greasy. It's greasy, everybody.
Yeah, the Ivies are 70,000 tuition, room, and board this year.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yep. So I mean, obviously, 5,400 is still helpful and better than not having that, but 5,400 out of 70K, you're less than 10% of the way there. And that's without buying the first book or the first pair of pants or the first coffee or
getting a meal.
And more than half of HBCU students are Pell eligible. So that means this is a hit on HBCUs.
I mean, and I'm saying all HBCUs, even the Howards and the Spelmans and the Morehouses. No. Most people who are at all of the HBCU schools, more than half, are on some form of financial aid.
Oh,
that's just the reality. But guess what? When you really look at, if you really look at where Americans are, my brother Jesse, former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., said that we are the best looking poor people on earth. The best, he said the best dressed. That's how he put it. Let me give my brother his full credit. The best dressed. But look, give my sorors. I'm gonna be in there for a day. So I'm gonna call you.
Well, call me. Let me know. I did not register for convention because I am supposed to be. I am trying to finish this book.
And well, please hurry up and finish
it. I'm not supposed to do anything that either does not have to do with the book or does not bring me money. So unfortunately, this is a rule that my baby imposed. I said I was doing something. She said, "Does it pay?" I said, no, but they my friends. She said, well, see them when they're finished with the book.
There you
So,
go. Hurry
there
up and finish the book.
Absolutely. Okay. I'll call you. We'll figure out a day when I can come back and talk about financial aid. I'll
Please.
send you the piece that I wrote about it, because basically what we're doing is we're treating our young people like debris.
Well,
We're really treating them like they don't matter. And that's the equivalent to a farmer eating his seed corn, because we say these young people are our future. But why won't we invest in them? I'm going to go because I see Brother Man sitting here looking like I got something to say, and she eating up my time.
no,
Not
well,
at all.
and of
It's a
course,
pleasure to talk to
you
you.
can hear Dr. Malvo on WPFW every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tune in, tune in, tune in. Of course, she's a nationally syndicated columnist. You need to get the information from her. We're sending you so much love. Soror Malvo.
Absolutely, Soror. Have a great show with Brother Wolf.
Much
Thank you.
love.
Take care.
I think he'd be cute. That's right. Dr. Max Wolf, these cuts are getting real. We're watching. As we just heard, the agriculture secretary says, let these deportations go forward in a strategic way, because we can get Medicaid recipients who are able-bodied. They need to be farm workers. And now we're watching the death toll rise in Texas. And many people are saying the Doge cuts bear a lot of responsibility, bear a lot of weight for what's happened, the tragedy, the unfolding tragedy, which grows by the hour in Texas. That having been said, we now see that the way that the big, beautiful bill was structured, which has now been signed into law, it will not kick in fully until just after the midterms.
That's nice.
Well, you got to talk to me. What are we looking at here? And let me give my love to Dave Dowling up there in Canada. Sending you much love, Bernadette D. Ray, Ashley King. Hey, all my people. Meet me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And I'm at Blue Sky. Of course, BSKY.social and at Santita J on X, and the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Dr. Wolf, I think these cuts are getting real. What did we get last week on the 4th of July?
I think that for a long time we've been taking away opportunity and redistributing wealth in terms of opportunities and what you can get help with from the mass of people to a few people, in part to give them tax cuts. And the Rubicon we crossed most recently here is that we've actually now started to take away things from poor people as opposed to just prevent opportunities. We're in your house as a government, taking the crap out from under your mattress and giving it to somebody with more money. So this is the kind of stuff that wealthy people have been afraid of for a long time. It's aggressive redistributive policy that would be called class war if it was focused more on people with money, but it's focused more on people without money. So we've now decided to take from the least of us to give to the wealthiest among us, who are so upset about whatever they're upset about, that this now seems like a good idea, or maybe they just feel like they can do it now. So we're sort of reframing the debate here. Maybe that'll start with the 17 million people, some non-trivial portion of whom will lose their lives from their loss of access to medicine. They'll certainly lose their wealth if they have any income or money, because it'll be attached against the medical bills they can't afford. Some of them probably don't know. We're taking cancer research money from kids and food from the SNAP program, the food stamp programs, supplemental nutrition programs. We're taking away all kinds of research, right? So if we've learned a few things as economists, and we can be rightly charged with not learning that many things, and if we agree on a lot of things as an economist, that's not that common either. There's a few things we know. If you spend on infrastructure, you get your money back with them, then some, and it's a better society. If you spend on education, you get your money back and then some, right? And what we've decided is if it's not exactly what I want, I'm going to knock it down, and I think that I'm going to rebuild something in the future with no money. But for now, I'll have my money, right? And so you got this mantra. At this point, it's kind of a religion that at all points in time, we should return money to wealthy Americans, and they'll make the society what it should be. But the irony is we have people so angry at where that program has taken us that they just voted for more. So angry, so desperate by their economic straits that they just voted for more of the medicine that put them in the hospital, right? So people are angry, or they there's a whole industry of getting people to blame the vulnerable, the weak, those who can't fight back. Right? Imagine an analysis of the world full of billionaires, glittering 50-story buildings everywhere, and thinking that the guy who's picking lettuce in the 100-degree heat is secretly the mastermind of the universe and is ripping you off by getting you a 99-cent iceberg lettuce. Like, that's the root of your problem. Or that some weird middle-aged guy with lipstick might read a book to your kid. I mean, I don't understand how you survey the landscape and see those as the looming risks. And I'm sure there's smart and reasonable people who do, but I haven't been successfully convinced yet. Could be my listening skills, but seems weird. And it seems like we do what we always do, which is give more money to the rich and blame the poor because they can't fight back.
So where do you see this going?
I mean, macroeconomically, it's terrible. I think what I can add to the debate is the following. There's lots of people who want to talk about the immorality of this, and I wouldn't argue those things. I don't think it's moral, right? But I think that misses the point, right? I think the point is this is bad economics. This is doing the wrong thing to be poorer and weaker, right? This is the energy drink instead of the breakfast, right? So this is probably, not as good for you as that breakfast. Might feel good for some people for a minute. To me, what makes this most upsetting is this is saying, I've given up on doing okay. I want to watch someone else suffer and feel better than that. And I don't think that road takes you to a good place. And I haven't seen it be successful. Again, sometimes I think our morality obsessions blind us from the macroeconomic realities. I'll give you one that's interesting to me right now. So I have a lot of family from Germany. When Americans talk about fascism and the Third Reich, which is talked about more for one reason or another lately than previously, it's always generally about how it's morally wrong, right? Again, I'm obviously not a fan, so I'm not plugging it as a system. What no one here ever talks about is how it destroyed the most dynamic rising capitalist country in the world. So the reason that a lot of Germans probably think of the Second World War and the rise of fascism as tragic is, of course, the human toll, but it's also that it took a proud, advanced nation, which was probably the most dynamic economy in the world, and destroyed it.
How so?
And it's struggling to recover and nowhere near fully recovered 75 years later.
How did fascism?
It broke the country in half. It bankrupted the country. It killed 2 generations of men. It cost them their prestige, the affection for them. It cost them every industry. Their cities were bombed flat, and their working age male population, 15 to 45, was dead or crippled. That was pretty symbolic, pretty serious, right? And it took them probably 35 years to begin to rebuild the industrial base. So, it crippled the country, it impoverished people, it destroyed the cities, it destroyed the factories, it destroyed the productive apparatus, it destroyed the savings, it wiped out the country. It literally knocked it into 2 different countries, both basically colonial powers. One under Russian supervision, one under American supervision. No foreign policy, a divided country, no mails, no factories, no infrastructure. It took it all the way back so that the country went from being, again, arguably one of, or the most advanced country in the world, to a shattered developing country living on handouts under foreign control. It took you about as far down from the top as anyone has ever gone.
Well, do you see this? Do you see this moment coming to the United States, or is it already here?
Yeah, I think it's here. I think it's kind of here. So in other words, I love the idea of rebuilding some capacity to produce things in the United States. I think it's a great idea. But here's how you do that. You build infrastructure, you send people to school, you produce a lot of engineers, you produce opportunity for young women, particularly. Again, not because it's morally right, although I think you could make that argument. I would buy it, but not because it works. Because the countries that do that stuff succeed, and the countries that don't fail. Right? This is a country that's become obsessed with whiskey and hookers for some people, not others. And the point is, if you want to do economic development, then the education and the roads tend to matter more, even if they're a little bit less quick than, whiskey and prostitute investment. Luxury goods for the very wealthy are bad investment, right? Again, they might be fun, and if I had tons of money, maybe I would go to outer space too. I don't know. Probably not a bridge I'll have to cross, but maybe. Who knows, right? The point is, as a social decision, giving a lot of money to people who already have a lot of money isn't economically effective. I mean, it's good for certain luxury goods. And if I sold 200-foot yachts, I'd be singing a different story. And if I sold $150 million houses or whatever, there are markets that are benefited by it. It can be good for some investment, but generally it doesn't work very well, right? It doesn't work that well. And having trade wars with other people doesn't make you better at producing stuff. It makes you hated and inflates the prices that domestic people pay, right? It's self-isolating and it tears down an architecture. You know, I love this story and other people don't, but I'll say it again. If there's a deck of 52 cards in a deck about, and you're the top card, and you're hell-bent on shuffling it while spitting in the face of everybody else playing, where does your card end up? There's a 51 and 52 chance it ends up lower in the deck. I don't like those odds. This is a dynamic story, but yeah, it's a little bit weird, right? The other thing is what we saw things like in the Third Reich and the rise of fascism in other countries, when elites were faced with real anger and fear about far left revolutions, upturning the society, taking property and throwing out the wealthy, right? So maybe it was the specter of a sort of Bolshevik style revolution or something 100 years ago, right? But that's not the case at all. There's no functional left in the United States much at all. Now, there was a cultural battle, and it went far enough to frighten people about woke and trans and stuff like that. But there was no immediate economic threat, right? So it's a bit unusual to do it here. And it doesn't make a ton of sense to me to rip up a system that puts you on top, right? It doesn't make a ton of sense to me to look at the left. Just a little example of what I mean. If you look to me, if you look to me at the lessons of COVID, countries with a good health infrastructure and good social messaging did really well. We did really badly, okay, because we don't have those things. We bet it all on the vaccine and then turned on vaccines, right? You couldn't get Americans to care enough about their health and their children and their family and the people around them to wear a mask, which was unfortunate, right? But we tried it. And we learned a few things despite ourselves. We learned that some public health infrastructure was important, and we did do some things right in getting a lot of people vaccinated quickly, but the messaging around the vaccination clearly wasn't very good, and the explanation was probably not enough to convince people who had their doubts from the past. So we now find ourselves 5 years later, having had a worse run through the COVID than a lot of folks, we find ourselves banning vaccines and deporting essential workers while turning on each other. That's an opportunity to learn something that feels like it wasn't fully done, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. We also know that preventative medicine works, and we're defunding it. We also know that alternative energy works, and we're defunding it. We also know that climate change is real, and we're pretending it isn't. We also know that universal basic income is probably essential to get through the AI and robotics revolution. We are not funding that. We also know that we're strong because we trade, we'll get rid of it. We also know we have an excellent specialty medical system, we're disassembling it. We also know we have some of the best universities in the world, we're gutting them. Right? So at times, some of this legislation feels a little bit like the politics of grudge and spite and performance, right? Which is, look what I can do. It's a flex, right? And look what I can stop. And if you don't do what I say and you don't follow me, then I'm going to punish you, right? And that all makes sense. That feeds an ego. It doesn't feed a growth and development plan, right? So the big beautiful bill feels like you're stripping away the assets of other people to show them you're the king.
But Max, having said how I'm trying to figure out what people don't see, is the cultural argument that strong that these little brown and black people who really are the essential workers. I mean, because a farm worker is an essential worker to me.
Of course, I mean, it's pretty hard. I don't know how long you've gone without eating, but it gets noticeable pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the problem. And we're watching people who are on track to become trillionaires with a T, with a T, with a T. And I just don't see this ending well, Max. I mean,
no, it already is too late to end it even reasonably well. So it's a question of how bad now. We're into the how bad, right? The car is skidded out of control. The driver looks impaired, and we're in the oncoming lane. So, I mean, like, this story doesn't end with a beautiful sunset and, humming and stuff. Probably this ends with candles and stuff, right? This doesn't look great. But the United States is resilient. We've made patterns of terrible decisions before. We still have a lot of good things going for us. But yeah, being a pariah state, being disliked by the world. I mean, one thing I think, to be fair to a lot of Trump voters, is what people think they vote for and against with politicians doesn't map to anything rational on any side, Democrat, Republican, left, center, right. So be fair to people.
Are not rational.
Aspirations matter.
Yeah,
but
they
I think,
matter, but but they're really, and don't get me wrong, I believe you keep hope alive. You got to have it. You got to have it. But you're right. I mean, the fact is, and even those whom we support, there are deep-seated needs that we project onto people, right?
Of course.
So it's not even about what they offer as much
Yeah.
as what we want them to give to us.
Yeah,
And
look, a guy much
really
like
pans out.
me, Louis Althusser, French philosopher, said, your ideology is the imaginary way you see the real world around you, your real social condition. Pretty well. That's the way you imagine reality. It is not reality. And so for me, for anyone, whether you agree with me or not, that's always probably true. So it's reasonable to keep it there. But I see a lot of the votes for Trump as protest votes. They're anger votes. They're saying, the system isn't worth it for me. Burn it down. Break it. Let's try something else. Let's try somebody who breaks all the rules. Right now, it also means you don't much care about the misogyny or the homophobia or the racism. And that can be a tougher bill to swallow. Either don't care, you love it, right?
But but
That's
we had
tricky.
that with Bernie, and the Democrats buried him.
Yeah.
It's like it was terrible.
But that's how parties work. I do think there's lots of false equivalents here, but look, I think the American, I don't have the same hitch on Trump that a lot of people have.
Well, see, my thing is, the only reason I brought up Bernie was he too was a protest vote.
Yeah, he was, and I think he got a lot of the same votes. Look, I think Mamdani, Bernie, Trump, they get a lot of the same people who are saying, you know what, life doesn't work for me. I play by the rules, I get screwed. Guys don't play by the rules, they do well. I don't like the rules. Burn it down. Pick the person that everyone who's an elite doesn't want you to vote for, and vote for that person. I understand that, right? It's very rudimentary. I don't know if it works. I feel like a lot of people slash the movies, slash the seats in the movies because they didn't like the movie and they didn't notice it was a drive-in, right? And so, that's kind of an unfortunate twist there that you want to pay attention to. I think there's a lot of anger. And look, anger and disappointment and brokenheartedness, which is where a lot of the patriotic Americans are right now, it doesn't drive good decisions, especially if billions and billions of dollars are spent to channel those real emotions into, things that probably don't help too much. But I feel like there's a lot of that with Trump, and I feel like he is always going to put on a show, whether it's calling some, pop-up prison tent Alcatraz or having guys on horseback stalking people in a park. There's a lot of people for whom this is a made-for-TV movie, and they want to watch it because it's interesting. And they don't know what the rules will be tomorrow, and they'll see all the people they're angry at for doing better than them, the Harvard kids, the immigrants, whoever they imagine is doing better than them, the people getting social assistance, right? Watching those people suffer make them feel like, hey, this is sort of shaking it up. And to some extent it is, and that's how you get the votes, right? I understand that. I guess on part of it, I just like my family and my country to sort of see through things like this and to think, hey, let's pick the best president, not the best candidate, right? Let's pick the person who's actually going to run this thing, not the. And you grew up with this in America, the kid who gives everyone cupcakes becomes the class president, right? And then fast forward, and the person who makes the most wild pledges of what they'll do wins. By the way, elected by the cynical people who say, I believe no politician, but this guy I believe. Because there's always a suspension of disbelief, right? Just saying, because you got to believe in something. You're a human being. Stories make us able to make sense of our lives, right? And so you're always going to do a story. And the question is, maybe we should have a Hippocratic oath around the stories that make us feel okay about a world that isn't. Right? One, and two, maybe it's okay to feel not okay about stuff if things are going not okay. Maybe it's time you get to that point, where everything isn't fine. Right?
I think that's where we're going, and I wonder how it will manifest. Because most Americans are not okay. They're not, and increasingly that will be so. Before we go, what? Your final thought? I mean, because I think we're already seeing the impact
Yeah.
of
I
those.
think the best way forward for most people is to get a crisp $20 bill, put it in an envelope, and mail it to the Santita Jackson show. It might be the only way forward. And I know people think, oh, this guy has 40 felonies, but I think of that as presidential. I'm just kidding with you. Look, I think it starts with being honest about where you are.
Hmm.
It starts with finding a way to make someone else's life better. We've gone as far as you're going to go, worried only about yourself. It's time to give up the bravado of I'm in this alone and I'm going to conquer the universe, right? As most Americans have figured out, you will not, right? But together we can take care of the basics. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
why other people have fought so hard for little things that we never fight for, like public transit and public education, right? And healthcare and stuff that might not be super sexy, but it's a real short life story without them. And the little rule of thumb is the stuff we're cutting, the public goods, is the way to artificially increase the quality of life for people in a country getting poorer. And that's what we're doing. We're a country getting poorer. That's who we are now. And so you may not get your own pool someday that you get to shoot at people when they relax in on a hot afternoon, but maybe the neighborhood gets a pool, right? And maybe you don't get a new SUV every 3 years, but maybe you can ride an air-conditioned, clean, and safe train and get where you need to get going, and your kids can too, right? And maybe you don't get the Brazilian butt lift you've always dreamed of, but maybe you get cardiac and respiratory care, which again, less sexy perhaps, but maybe, more exciting, perhaps, in a different way. So maybe you choose the basics and you give up on some of the good things, because in the end of the day, what makes us valuable and interesting and what we really need is some sense of community, and that we're not in this alone. And I think COVID really broke that up. People felt like they were left alone and left to die. And I think the reason they felt that way is because they were, right? And the lesson from there doesn't have to be we're in this alone, who cares about everybody else. The lesson has to be like, oh my God, we can't be in this alone. We need to help each other. And the truth is, that's probably the most connection you'll have to other people anyway. And it might help you with this sort of deaths of despair and epidemic of loneliness. Although I understand it's hard to give up on those fantasies of the nicer stuff and the bigger house and whatever it is that sort of particularly captures your imagination about a future affluence. And I think it matters that people strive and compete and work hard and try to do better. I just don't know if they have to do all that alone all the time. And I think that maybe every single psychological study ever done about that stuff wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah. Yeah. Well, the old expression, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And
and go together doesn't mean ride someone smaller than you. I think this would be the one caveat we need to mention here.
Thank you. Be very specific. The power of life and death is in your tongue, everybody. And guess what? That means you don't, and you're right. I mean, but I've never done Schadenfreude well. I don't want to pull for anyone else's downfall, and I don't think that my advantage should come at your expense. We have to, as you have said, grow up in our politics so that we can.
It just seems like everything isn't a material thing to dream of alone or to have over someone else. We tried that, right?
Yeah, you know what? It doesn't work.
They long time, so we gave it a shot, right? The other thing I think is that disengaging from the rest of the world is not what you do when you don't want to. You don't want to be an empire. Stop coercing other people into being your subjects, but you engage them. Right? This is the person who can't subjugate people socially around them. Their basement for us. That's a weird decision. Right? You can try engaging people as equals or as someone different you can learn from. It doesn't have to have a hierarchy. And I also think just socially, and this is as much the problem, or maybe more the problem of the left and Democrats, is maybe spending this many decades thinking about what makes us different and 0 seconds thinking about what makes us similar wasn't a great idea. Because there's a lot of things that do make us similar, more than we'd like. Scientifically, we're identical. We get really excited about these little differences, but like scientifically, we're about the same thing. We just love this idea that we're super different right now, right? But most people on some level do still kind of want the same thing, right? They want some food to eat and some social time. They want a job. They want to contribute. They want to be treated with some respect. and maybe have health care and be able to move around and have a place to live that isn't dangerous. And then you get to the fine tuning, and people should be different, and we should celebrate and acknowledge our differences. We've tried to pretend they don't exist. That doesn't work either. But the point is, we don't want things all that different. And despite what someone can tell you in a moment of anger, you are not helped by other people suffering. You're just not, right? You're just a bitter guy watching someone else suffer and then waiting. It's not my phrase, but it's a nice one. Consequences will not come with a sugary aftertaste from all that, right? And everything also has a blowback. Last thing I'll say is a strange thing happened in America in the last 20 years in my life, which is we decided that poor people were terrifying and violent, but that we can do anything we want to them and they'll never fight back. As a society, it's a weird combination of thoughts.
Absolutely.
Neither of which makes much sense. But I can abuse you endlessly and you'll never even self-defend because you're so violent and dangerous that you need to be abused.
Well,
It's an odd conjecture. It's a very odd conjecture from a logical perspective.
Well, they did that during slavery.
Yeah.
And treat
That
you.
didn't work either.
No, right? It didn't. No, it didn't.
So the point is, you can sort of be upset about the morality here, which I understand. Or you can get interested in the weird little fact that guys who study too much economics and don't get out much, like myself, will notice it also doesn't work. So yes, it's the wrong thing to do, but it also doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so however good you feel or however angry you are that you can't get a job, deporting someone else is not going to get you the job. It's just not going to get you the job. And ask yourself why a bunch of people who are make billions and billions of dollars in technology want you to focus on labor competition and not technology, when those of us who study labor economics can tell you that people who lost their jobs, and it's rarely one-to-one and simple, but the people who lost their jobs, they mostly lost their jobs to technology. They didn't lose their jobs to other people. America actually produces more manufactured output and dollar value than it did before. It just isn't people who produce it. Right? It's mostly machinery. So, and again, not a Luddite, I don't think you should go smash a machine either. But a society that can take care of itself and take care of its people can find you a new place that makes sense. They don't have to hold back forward progress or hurt someone else. And the last part of it, it's probably liberating to see the rest of the world. There is the other 96% of the world's population, the other 81% of economic opportunity, the other 185 countries. Right? It might be interesting to look at those people. Right? Just because you like their food doesn't mean you have to deport them. There's probably another way.
Dr. Max Wolf, everybody. Coming up, we need your thinking. And let's apply this to what's happening in
somebody who did well enough to get themselves that Brazilian bloodlust would probably be better for
No, you cut that out.
I'm still saving.
No, that's another BB.
There's another good cause.
There you go. Let's talk about Texas, everybody. What's happening down there? As of the taping of the show, more than 108 people have been killed. They're looking for many more. More than 200 have been rescued. It is an unfolding tragedy. Many people are wondering if the DOGE cuts have at least a little something to do with this. Understaffing of vital agencies that could have warned people. Sure, there's a lot of flooding in this area, but something really special happened there, and a lot of people were not on board to help the people. Got to talk about it here on the Santita Jackson Show. Dr. Max Wolf, everybody. Brilliant economist, man of great spirit and heart. More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute.